Hey, everybody. This is So Many Sequels. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
I have to go second. I'm not used to that. Wow.
I know.
There's that gap now.
Andrew, as they say, is on assignment, I'll say.
Oh, yeah.
Make him seem busy.
Yeah.
So you get three of us today. We're going to talk about the Suicide Squad, the new Suicide Squad, not Suicide Squad. This one is important to distinguish that it has a "the" at the beginning. This movie, of course, just came out as of recording about a week ago on HBO Max and in theaters. This is James Gunn's attempt at soft rebooting the Suicide Squad after the 2016 movie was not well received. The stars had to really align for this movie to get made because basically Warner Brothers swooped up James Gunn pretty quickly after he was fired from Guardians 3 by Marvel and Disney, and was then rehired not too long after that. So there was a short window of time where they were able to grab him for this movie, and thank goodness they did, because as we will discuss here, without having spoken to you guys about this, I'm certain we will all at least say it is better than that first one.
Oh, I mean, how could it not be?
We've got mostly a new range of characters in this one, some returning. Obviously, the notable ones being Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn and Viola Davis's character, whose name escapes me, Waller?
Amanda Waller.
With
Rick Flagg.
And Flagg.
Yep.
We got but who remembers him?
True, honestly, yeah.
So we got a brand new adventure with the good bad guys. Who wants to kind of go first with this? How did we all watch it? Did anybody go to a theater for this one?
I did.
Only Garrett went.
So I've seen it twice. I watched it once in the theater when it came out, and then I watched it again at home on HBO Max. And I will say that I had more fun in the theater. While I had fun at home, I do think that, and I think that I was watching it a little more critically the second time, which plays into it as well, because, and I think this is just an at-home thing for me, where again, at home, I found myself a little more disinterested on my phone with more distractions, I didn't pay as much of attention as I did in the theater, because I had already seen it and it was mostly a refresher. But I will say that I very much liked it in the theater a lot. Watching it at home, I picked up a lot more on issues with it. I think the cast, I'll start with the good stuff. The cast is fantastic. I think that the way that they brought everybody together, and James Gunn kind of refocused and made it about them. I genuinely don't remember much about the first one because it was so bad. But it always felt like they never were a cohesive unit. Whereas this one, they started off, as singular villains or whatever, and then they came together relatively quickly, and you see this bond as a team. And that was the most intriguing aspect of this version to me. Had a lot of issues with why upon the second time, the whole mission itself, unnecessary, absolutely worthless. The whole Harley Quinn thing's absolutely worthless. She's not. And the payoff that we get from the separation is a lot of fun. And then when they reconnect, it really picks up for me again. But the whole government overthrow storyline really seemed thrown in there and unnecessary. And I think that they either should have made that more important or figured out a way to work Harley Quinn in better, because I think that her story was poor. And I also was not a huge fan of the monster.
You didn't like it?
Was a little too silly. It was a little too silly until Steve Agee called it a kaiju, and then I felt like they were just leaning into it. But if I was supposed to think this drunk starfish was intimidating at any point in time, I did not.
I don't know if you were. I mean,
they didn't present
it was a giant monster. But
they didn't. The whole thing is funny until you get to the monster, and then you're supposed to take the monster seriously. I don't know the kaiju thing. Like, no,
I don't know if you're really supposed to take it seriously. I think it is serious in the sense that it is a big thing that they've got to kill, but it is not necessary. I think I think everything about this, James Gunn had his tongue firmly in his cheek.
And I can believe that. I just don't think the monster hit.
Like this is going back. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to take over, but like you said, it's
your turn.
It's sort of, there's that surreal nature to it of like, you want comic book movies, this is comic books, is absurdly weird things and monsters and people who just have guns that just build themselves, anyway,
keep going.
Anything else, Garrett?
No, keep going.
So I watched it at home, and which I don't think it really took too much away from me. It might have been interesting to see it with the rest of an audience who would be laughing or cheering or something like that. But it worked pretty well for me. Really only paused it once, and it was because I really wanted to write down notes for the podcast. In anticipation of this recording, I didn't do this before the movie, but in anticipation of this recording, I did go back and watch 2016 Suicide Squad. I wanted to. I could compare notes, so I could compare and contrast, and not be focusing on my memory from 2016. Because similar to 2013's Man of Steel, I kind of feel like I haven't watched that movie since I left the theater that day. So all of my criticisms are based on that, and I could be completely misremembering things. And I can confirm that I was not. That movie is trash. What James Gunn did here was have a cohesive story that felt like one story. The 2016, I don't even want to call it David Ayers. The 2016 Suicide Squad is so disjointed and so narratively lacking in coherency, much like my speech, that it's like, it's amazing that they let it be put in the theaters. James Gunn, I remember when Josh, you talked about him getting scooped up by Warner Brothers. I remember being really disappointed at the time. We might have recorded me saying this. I don't know. Because when James Gunn was let go, when Disney let James Gunn go, I was like, this is an opportunity for James Gunn to make his own thing now, like an original idea again. Before Guardians, he had Slither, which has its fans. I was like, James Gunn's a name now. Like, he's a name on the level of a Jon Favreau or J.J. Abrams or something like that. Bring him. Hopefully, someone will bring him in and let him, like, hey, James, what do you want to do? What's your story? And I was really kind of disappointed that Warner was like, hey, come here and make another comic book movie for us. Because I was like, oh man, we know what he can do with that. I was kind of hoping to see what's in his head. Thankfully, though, he seems to like. If you had any doubts that James Gunn was a good writer, director, this proves that he is. Like, it's very good. It's very funny. It has that creativity that you really want, I think, from an action movie, and has that comedy. Like you said, the cast is great. Performances are hilarious at times. Honestly, the dynamic between Peacemaker and Bloodsport is like the entire thing for me. Like their rivalry and dislike of each other is so entertaining. John Cena and Idris Elba. Like, honestly, I know that John Cena has got a Peacemaker show coming to HBO Max, and honestly, I'm gonna be very disappointed because I have a feeling Idris Elba is not going to be in it anywhere.
I will say, just to jump in, for me, this is the best thing John Cena's done.
Yeah,
without question. It's not even close based on what I've seen.
I'm trying to think of what The Rock's like definitive. Everybody going, oh hey, this is actually really good, Dwayne. And what that movie was for Dwayne, because this is John Cena's like, oh, John Cena's actually like can do everything. Like, he's very funny. He's intimidating. He totally owns this character. And I think a lot of his roles before this have been serviceable. They've been good. I've never saw Blockers, but I think
you've seen Blockers with me. That is a great movie.
I have heard that people say that Blockers is very, very funny in it. He's
what is the one with Amy Poehler and Tina Fey? Sisters,
yeah.
Trainwreck.
And Trainwreck, he's very funny in Trainwreck.
I mean, I think he's got a real niche carved out here with comedy, and he could do action comedy pretty well. I'm really interested to see where he goes from here. But I also have a bit of a take that's probably my worst take since saying I didn't really get into the story of In the Heights. So King Shark didn't really do it for me. And I know that
Stallone, huh? You didn't like Stallone.
It wasn't necessarily the Stallone. Honestly, I kind of feel like of that main group, which I want to talk about the other group too in a minute, but of the main group, King Shark is kind of the weakest overall for me. I was really, really into David Dalmatian's Polka Dot Man. I was actually Ratcatcher was a slow burn, but man, she turned out to be a really interesting, pivotal character.
That moment between her and Bloodsport is really, really great when they're on the bus or the van or whatever. That is a really great moment.
And her whole thing becomes so poignant. And then, like I said, John Cena, Peacemaker and Bloodsport have this fascinating dynamic that like King Shark was just kind of like there for me. And like, he was kind of like it was not this, it's not the same situation with Groot where there was like this childlike innocence and he's a good guy. It's like, there's this childlike innocence, but it's also a giant shark. And it was funny at times, but also just like comparatively, like I loved all these other characters. I found all of them more interesting. I even found Rick Flagg more interesting. Rick Flagg, who was just so boring in the first one. They managed to make him feel like he's the normal guy surrounded by craziness, and he just sort of takes it in stride.
He's connected to Bloodsport, and he is like the military button-up good guy version of Bloodsport and Peacemaker. Like he's what Peacemaker wants to be without being crazy.
The funny thing is, if you had to ask me in 2015 who should be Rick Flagg, I would have told you John Cena, because Rick Flagg, from what I understand from a lot of his comic appearances, is that sort of like buttoned up, straight lace, like soldier who does what he does because that's what he's supposed to do. I think there's there's a Justice League animated episode where they have Rick Flagg and the Task Force X, and someone says, "So why are you doing this?" He goes, because I was asked. Like, I don't need to have a bomb put in my head to do what's right for our country or something like that, right? And that just seems to me like John Cena would nail that. But I'm glad that John Cena is where he is now. I want to talk about the first. Actually, Josh, you need to go. What did you think?
I'll try not to be too repetitive because I agree with a lot of what was already said. I really enjoyed it. It is a top tier of the DCEU movies for me. I think I had some initial concerns when it was announced that James Gunn would take this on, because I thought, okay, well, the Suicide Squad seems awfully similar to Guardians of the Galaxy. And that feels a little icky, tacky, maybe on paper. So I thought, well, I don't want to just watch another Guardians movie. But those fears were put to rest, because I do not think this feels like a Guardians movie at all. And it could have, but I think that just shows how good of a writer and director that James Gunn is. Each character stands on its own. You could make some similarities to characters in other universes, but that's kind of possible with anything, because comic book characters kind of share a lot of traits anyway. So that was put to rest. What?
To be fair, it's always a weird struggle because I don't know the timelines, but DC has always been first as far as who's been around longer, DC or Marvel. So it's always an interesting debate as who comes first, because the characters are based on their comics. So like if Bloodsport or somebody is reminded of somebody in a Marvel thing, who's copying who is always the question. Right. It doesn't matter. It's just a very interesting thing, and it's.
Yeah, I think for the sake of movie making, it might be fair to say that that first Suicide Squad movie came out as DC's attempt to have their own Guardians of the Galaxy. So, and with their history of not letting filmmakers make their movies, you could see how they might be. James, what if you made it a little more, I don't know, Marvel-y? Could you do that? I mean, that's what they had Joss do for Justice League. So that ended up not being a thing, thankfully. The characters are really good. These are all characters, for the most part, that I had never heard of. And that's always fun because, one of the things that comes up with when an A-list character gets a reboot or whatever is, how much of this have we already heard a million times? We know how Spider-Man came to be. We know how Batman came to be, blah, blah, blah. Most people don't know how these characters came to be, and that makes it more fun. I don't know who the Polka Dot Man is. Literally never heard of him until this movie. And I probably represent the casual moviegoer in that sense because I don't know a lot of deep cut DC characters. Really? I think the only characters I know about in this whole movie was Harley Quinn and King Shark. I didn't know any of the others.
Thanks to the Flash, yeah.
Maybe.
You're a King
Flash
Shark
and the Harley Quinn animated show has King Shark.
Oh, yeah.
Voiced by Ron Funches, and it is very fun.
I forgot to mention it. Yeah.
One thing that hasn't been talked about yet that I need to talk about is this movie is so gross. It is, and I'm not even talking about gore. It's just unsettlingly visually gross. The big ones that come to mind, because gore is whatever. I watch horror movies, blood and guts, that's fine. But that Polka Dot Man's rash, when it got real bad, was gross. Yeah,
unsettling.
The starfish, the detail in the starfish made me queasy. Yeah. The armpit monsters flying out of it was gross. Watching Harley jump through his eyeball and then a million rats eat like his retina.
Eat his retina, the blood, just eat it. And then what about when they had somebody who had the starfish on his face and is pulled back, and so like you had seen it, like the starfish is just completely eaten away its face in the starfish outline.
It is such a nasty movie, and that's definitely a James Gunn thing. He's kind of gross, in that way.
Yeah, so it earns that R rating.
It does. I have to say that's my biggest issue with the starfish as the villain was he was just nasty, and I didn't want to look at him. Too gross for me.
I think it's. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
That's basically all I had to say about him.
I like it though, man, because
I don't dislike it. I just think it's gross and it's a little Act 3 predictable, isn't it?
Maybe it's Starro as Starro as a character. I don't like. There's been various, to use a common term now, variations on Starro that I've seen. And Starro was, if you go all the way back in your comics Rolodex for DC, Starro is the first thing that the Justice League ever came together to fight. And, because it's this big alien that's just mind controlling people and turning them into, mindless zombies. In Batman Beyond, there's this great episode with a future Justice League where Superman is being controlled by Starro. Fascinating episode, really interesting. And its presentation here is like I said, it's very tongue in cheek. It's that like the absurdity of it. Now, I want to talk about a little bit like it's kind of ruined by the promotion of the movie, I think, because I think, well, I say that, like they show a little bit of it in the movie itself, but like even in the movie itself, like if you had not seen in the promotion that there was that this big creature is going to come up, they had trailers that said it's a kaiju and all that, right? I feel like the surprise that he was there would have been pretty interesting because the mission starts so simple. We're not giving you all the details. Just go destroy this building and get out, right? That's all they know. They don't know what's in the building. It doesn't matter what's in the building. Just destroy it and get out. Incidentally, I think it's funny that Idris Elba still has to say the word Jotunheim all the time. And get out, and then, problem escalates to an absurd degree, which feels like honestly, I want to say that if none of this was based on DC Comics, it wouldn't be that surprising, because you would just think, man, James Gunn's insane. A giant starfish monster. This guy's what'll he think of next? Right. And it felt like a situation where the Suicide Squad definitely should have just left, but for some reason they stuck with it.
I think that they missed an opportunity to take it. I don't mind the silliness of it. I mind the over the top silliness of it. For me, it went a little too far into the I will give a whole lot of line and slack, and like, you can create this ridiculous thing. It just went a little too far. But I think if they wanted to make it a little more serious, what they should have done is hide the actual starfish and start with the mind control starfish. Like, you say Project Starfish, and then all of a sudden you blow up that building and it starts to fall, and then birds of starfish come out and start taking over people's minds, and then they start uprising, and the Suicide Squad has to beat that. And then as the building continues to fall, or inverse it, where the starfish like explodes the building, and then maybe it's a little more like, but like, you hit me with the starfish and I'm like, what the hell is this floppy thing doing? And then you give me the actual creepy thing, which is the mind control. Give me the mind control first, and then show me who's behind it.
We saw a little bit of that. There was a lot of build. There's a lot of tease to that moment. I think they missed another opportunity. And I really, honestly, I was thinking, I started thinking this is what's going to happen. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. If you're watching, if you happen to be listening or watching, spoiler alert, please go watch the Suicide Squad with John Cena and Idris Elba at first, and then come back. They established that the the little Starros could bring dead people back to life, could just inhabit a body and move it. So after Idris Elba killed John Cena, and they start going through all this stuff and they're fighting, I thought, it's going to bring Peacemaker back to life. And it's like, so we're not just dealing with fighting these regular, ordinary people. We have to fight a zombified Peacemaker. Like, that would be like, what a way. And then, you have John Cena delivering these creature lines that, like, all these characters are like talking all these people are talking as the creature. So you got, John Cena's your big boss at the end. Again, like, after you thought he was done, he's back. And then that didn't happen. So I was very disappointed. I kept waiting. I was like, here he comes. He's going to pop up. Watch this. Here he goes. Here he goes. Didn't happen. So missed opportunity there to have John Cena, zombie John Cena. Can we talk about the opening a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that anyway, because I really like the misdirection that the marketing played with the first Suicide Squad team, who is heavily promoted in the marketing.
All these comedians and cast members.
Yeah.
You finally get Nathan Fillion as a superhero. All of us nerds have been wanting that forever. Oh my god.
Davidson's here for you young 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
You crazy SNL fans. All this, it goes so far, so much further than I just watched it, so much further to establishing the ruthlessness of Amanda Waller to have her sacrifice a team of people just so they can sneak up unsuspected on a different beach. And it gives you two things. The first movie did a terrible job of exemplifying what the Suicide Squad is, because pretty much the entire Suicide Squad survived in that movie. So like, whereas one person got their head blown off, and it was a character that they literally introduced 1 minute earlier. So like, who cares? This gives you, here's the team. We're getting in the chopper. We're going down. You watch them. They're in the trenches. They're scared. They're not sure what's going on. And then they just get obliterated. One of them gets their head blown off. It is so, and then you're like, holy this is not going well. And then she goes, Team 2, you're ready to make your approach. They swarm up and you go, holy hell. She just sacrificed like 8 people for the good of the mission. And it makes her so much more intimidating. And I think Viola Davis as Amanda Waller is so much more intimidating in this movie than she was in the previous.
Mhm.
And it gives you an example of the Suicide Squad being expendable. That's the whole point, is that if none of these people have to survive, like they're good with losing them. They're murderers and rapists and hitmen and
Weasels.
and weasel people. Yeah. So like, I just thought the first 15 minutes of this movie are just like a genius stroke.
Well, and they gave those people that they marketed such easily expendable titles. And like, you think that you're going to get this, and then you see what they do, and it's like, okay, I'm fine with this. Like, it's funny now.
Mm-hmm.
You get the people that you needed. And it also goes to show, I mean, she purposely put Rick with that team, and he was able to escape, but like, it wasn't necessarily the plan.
Yeah, it just works out. Hey, Rick happened to survive, and so did Harley. Good for them.
Yeah.
I liked Harley's through line. I know you said you didn't like the
I like her. Her story is absolutely unnecessary and stupid. It's got a great payoff, but everything that builds up to it is a waste of time.
I honestly I kind of liked it. I liked her being swept up into the lap of luxury for a few minutes.
I couldn't even tell you those people's names.
Yeah, I'm not really.
None of them mattered in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't overall matter, but that's the point. It's Harley who matters, and so
but they could have treated her better. I honestly think as good as she was, she got shafted in this movie. She shined, but her entire story was the worst part of the movie.
Oh, I don't know.
Her entire story, not her, but her story was bad.
No, I don't know about that, but that's fine. Man, we're running out of time already.
Yeah.
And to get into the box office, we'll talk about James Gunn, because I love James. I've loved him since Slither. He's done a bunch of stuff, but I agree that he's a name, and I wonder if Suicide Squad as a name and its bad reputation was too much to overcome even for that at the box office. Because if I remember right, it did not do that well, based on expectations.
I'm trying to sort his box office success here. Oh, he's listed as a producer there. Director credits. Here we go. Let's go with worldwide. All right. Do you want to go ahead and get into the box office, or
let's do it?
Okay. All right. Here we go. So, Suicide Squad, the Suicide Squad opened to what many are calling a disappointing $26 million its opening weekend of August 6th. And I would tend to agree, only because as the pandemic rolls on, and we're now in the arms of the Delta variant, as it were, movies had started to make their way back. Black Widow just a month ago opened to the highest that we had seen during the pandemic, with 80 million. So for Suicide Squad, which had, I think, a chance at somewhere between 50 and 55 million, even for a rated R movie, to open only to 26, kind of shows that I think people aren't excited about getting out. How much of that can you blame on HBO Max? Maybe some, but I feel like if people were really excited, they had probably gone to see this in the theater. So you kind of hope that it would make a little bit more, but I mean, what can you do? Compared to, I only have the opening weekend numbers that, the original Suicide Squad in 2016, same weekend opened to 130 million. Like, I mean, that's in a healthy market. I think this movie could have easily opened over 100 million. Maybe a little less than the original, because the original kind of had that hype of being like, oh, this is the first time. This is a reboot. This is the reboot. And like, can it, I saw the first one, it wasn't any good, so there could be worries there. For James Gunn, it looks like this won't necessarily be his worst opening weekend. And in fact, as a director, he's the director of Slither, that opened to 3.8. Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one opened to 94 million. Guardians 2 opened to 146 million. Guardians Volume 2 is his highest grossing movie ever, with 869 million, 770 for the first one. Right now, I mean, we talked about that domestic release, but internationally, the Suicide Squad's doing about the same, with a worldwide total of 80.1 million right now. for the year of for the year, I believe. Hang on here, yearly. Got to sort my stuff out. Yearly 2021. In terms of domestic releases, Black Widow has passed Fast 9 as the highest earning movie of the year, 176 million domestically. Fast 9 with 171. Quiet Place 2 with 159. Godzilla versus Kong right at 100 million. And then Cruella at number 5 with 85 million. A handful of other movies in there as well. And I'll just leave it there for this time.
Okay. Then I will say, in order to be fair to Andrew, who needs all the help he can get, why don't we take a bye week on the Letterboxd game?
Oh, okay.
And just give our scores instead, so as not to inflate the numbers while he's not here to play.
Sure, is not a bad idea, and we'll just double it up next time. Next time he's here, we'll just drag up Suicide Squad real quick.
For me, it's a 3.5. I think that that is great on my scale. 3.5 is a great on my scale.
Really?
What he was able to do with what he was given to turn it around and give people a positive experience from this movie that was just absolute trash is an absolutely great effort. It has its faults still, mainly my issues with the Harley Quinn story. But it is a great turnaround for this franchise.
I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Ooh, spicy.
I did. I 4.5 on my list is practically perfect, which I thought this was. The only things holding it back for me were, like I said, I thought King Shark was kind of pointless. Wasn't really much of interest. And I kind of think that, Garrett, I think you've made some good points. I think that, it is fairly tongue in cheek, and maybe they could have lessened that a little bit. Maybe they could have made some other decisions, but that's a risky run. This is, Warner Brothers unfortunately had to ruin a lot of directors' lives in order to realize, hey, maybe we should give the director writer as much control as we can.
Yeah. I'm going to also give it a 3.5, which I feel like is pretty fair. I liked it well enough. I enjoyed it. I watched it again, and I would watch it again. So it's a 3.5 for me. And that is kind of perfect because Garrett and I's 3.5 and David's 4.5 averages out to a 3.8, which is exactly what Letterboxd's score is. It is a 3.8. So
okay.
How about that?
Perfect. The algorithm
works out. It always
are in the Letterboxd algorithm.
But that's the Suicide Squad. We'll see you guys next time. Be sure to find us online at somanysequels.com, where you can go back and check out all our episodes and our social media. Till next time, see ya.